So now we're moving to our first speaker, Phyllis Lambert.
Hi, this is wonderful to be able to speak about Blanche. I will talk about some of the projects that she did in Montreal. And from the time they were there, 57 to 77, 20 years, I guess. And these were a few of the 150 projects that they did in that time. So Blanche and Sandy and I became great friends when they went to Toronto. They moved to Toronto, of course, because she was going to teach there. And I had only they'd been in Montreal in 57, and I only came back to Montreal in 73. So I guess we weren't too much in contact. But, you know, in Toronto, I used to bed down at their place whenever I visited. And Blanche and I, next please, went on to next. I'm supposed to say next, and you're supposed to move it.
Yeah, great.
Oh, thank you. And we went on wonderful adventures together sometimes, even when we were, excuse me, my voice is gone. Even in what was I going to say? Adventurous trips that were washed out, rained out. Oh yes, and I wanted to say, Blanche made the most wonderful bread. And of course, I always had it when I went there, but she also always sent it to me for Christmas. It was wonderful. We didn't see each other much in Montreal, as I mentioned, but we worked on many of the same projects, but they were avant-garde. They were years ahead of just pretty what happened in most cases. The work that they did had such a huge impact on Montreal. Referring to an early plan of theirs, Blanche wrote, most significant to me is that Montreal does not have an elevated expressway along Commissioner Street, Rue de la Commune, and has, as a consequence, preserved Old Montreal, no Gardner Expressway. In quoting Blanche, I left out her attribution of this to Sandy, of this great vision, the triumph of the utmost importance. I am saying that she said it was only due to Sandy alone. Blanche said, this brings up the question of who did what. Certainly Sandy's Dutch painter's eyes and saw quality as planners, not painter. Well, he was a wonderful sculptor. Sandy's Dutch planner's eyes saw the qualities of Montreal's 17th and 18th century city, which was actually in very, very much neglected. And as a European living in historical cities, he understood the need to search for the documents and then the great maps of the historical maps. But Blanche's accomplishments deny her claim. They worked together. Blanche Van Ginkel remembers from childhood Brenda Van Ginkel, sorry, remembers their constant talk about architecture at dinner and everywhere. Blanche wrote, and it was Blanche who wrote the program for Expo 67. The human essence of the place and the pragmatic parts of it. Oh, okay, this is what she was saying. It must have a worthy setting. The exhibition should be epitomized. This is Old Montreal. We'll get to the Expo in a minute. The exhibition should be epitomize Montreal, its environment, its natural features, being the St. Lawrence and the mountain. Very, very few people remember this, understood this. The viewpoint, to be able to see the site and entering it, was so tremendous that you could see two bridges as you came in, so that you could see the site and you could see the mountain, you could see the city, and of course, vice versa, going from them, you could see down. so those bridges were, of course, the Jacques Cartier and the Champlain bridges. And it had to be strategically located with respect to the major networks of parking, of highways and public transit, and then, of course, the issues of parking and lodging and visiting the city. But the development of the site should be of benefit to the city and its needs. The total development of the metropolis can be influenced and the face of the city changed, said Bloch. Now, this map this drawing is a quick drawing in somebody's in Sandy's office, and you notice that this is the site, I believe, and here's Old Montreal. Well, here's Old Montreal, sort of, and this was the highway, I guess, that was projected instead of going right through Old Montreal. And so the idea was to have, they felt very strongly you had to have the new project, the city, improve the local situation of the city, the areas that were no longer viable or outdated or not used or needed changing. You know, some of that came from their CIAT training, I think, but also, next please. So this shows the site that they had. This is Point St. Charles over here. And these are various other parts. This is of Montreal and the case. And these are two different sites. So they had it on various sites, and you see them very much. This is gray. It's not. It's movement of traffic and things like that. But what is so interesting about it, and of course, the site wasn't there. It was moved to the islands. But the whole principles that they had applied to how you would do a new project for a great international exhibition, but also it advanced many many areas of Montreal that weren't touched for years. For example, Point St. Charles, which is down at the bottom, is now under discussion with huge amount of public input. And we don't know what the results are. There are problems that haven't been resolved. Next, please. Okay, now here they were working for the MCM, which is the Montreal City, the Montreal Citizens Movement that was opposing Mayor Drapeau, who, there were problems with Mayor Drapeau, many of them. And so they actually made this study of the movement. Next, please. This was the last one was, of course, what they proposed. This was, of course, the first. It got back and forth. This is, all cloche, and the other was actually a much better thing. You see, this is Old Montreal down here. Okay. I think I'm way behind on my notes here. Oh, yeah, okay, fine. Next, please. Now, this is a plan for Victoria Square. Now, Victoria Square, this is the detail of that, obviously, as you can see. And Victoria Square is way out to the north. But this shows so much what the situation was when they were doing. This is, of course, Marie-Anne-de-Mont, the Cathedral of Montreal. And this is the new hotel that was under construction. And this is where the Place Bonaventure, and this is where Place Bonaventure would eventually go. And this was, so you see all these places that are sort of rubbed out. Of course, these are the great squares, these great green spaces in Montreal. But this was such an important thing in Montreal. And what would be built in many of the places, for example, Place Bonaventure, at the square near Victoria Square, would be the Caisse de dépôt de Placement that incorporated all existing patrimonial buildings, covered part of the east-west throughway, and fashioned the new Place Riappel, and at the same time faced the new convention hall. Proposed environment of Place Victoria in Montreal with special references to University Street and Victoria Square. So these are the kind of things that they were working with. And I'll go on to the, oh yes, so they did a study for Canal du Chine. I don't have a map, a plan of that, but it was commissioned by the city in order to investigate the planning and possibilities, as that was the time when the International Seaway of 1954 to 1959 had made the Chine Canal obsolete as a means of moving goods and also as a site for industry. So again, this was dealing with all the major issues of the time. And one of the studies that Blanche undertook, Blanche and Sandy, on their own account, is a long-range plan to preserve and expand Mount Royal. Next, please. Yeah, great. Park, in which a citizens' movement was involved. I mean, not the citizens, the citizens, people had been fighting for years, and actually it was 60 years later that finally the mountain was classified as a place of historical importance, and so that you can't develop it anymore. But there were all sorts of inroads that were being made onto it, and people, there's already some development. And on the right, you see the kind of the methodology. This is a map of the 1880s, at the time that the park was being planned, and it shows the sites that existed that were owned by various people that had to be, of course, bought up in order to create the park. So the whole methodology is wonderful. Next, please. Ooh, how did that get there? Oh, I guess it's fine. Okay. I didn't think I'd gotten here so fast. Okay, as noted earlier, Blanche and Sandy devoted much of their time to research and design projects that were generated and paid for by them, and sometimes with other people who would join them pro bono. And this is a study it's interesting because it's a very small scale. It's one block and mountain. Those who know Montreal, that's whole Renfrew on the corner there. And so this was the whole interior of the rule. This was before, this was just a plan of what existed there. Next, please. And this is what part of the plan that they had. This is, I think, phase one of the plan. But you see this sort of line here. This was actually, they made over this area, they made a double height room which to be used for a restaurant, I think. But the idea was that all these people would have various, that you could use, because these buildings are so deep, that you could cut them down. That's what they did on the next stage. And so this part would belong to this part, to the alley. And here they actually made a kind of big areaway to it. Now this is very interesting because it's a block next to which the Musée des Beaux-Arts finally developed their new project by Safdie. But the point is that it was a project that, for a particular site, yes, but it was something that was a question of how do you densify commercial areas in the city. And this was, of course, this is something people in Toronto have been doing for housing in a very interesting way. And this is a very, very interesting example. And next, please. Now, this is a truck survey. And this shows the types of trucks. I'm sorry, the length of stay, small, medium, and large times of staying, and what time of day they were there, and and which buildings they were, they needed to service. Now, showing this, because this is one of the myriad of studies they did for this particular project. It wasn't just a very pretty inner court, inner alleyway that was to be developed into something that was lively and people could live in. This is very much Blanche's sense of things, I think. But it was something that you had to have all these basic studies made for. And I'm just going to leave this on the screen because I don't have any other images to show you. But I just wanted to mention in closing about I have something to say in a minute, but it was a vastly different scale that involved a huge number of technical studies. Was the airport for Montreal, not the airport, the international airport. Well, as you all know, there was the what was the name of the place?
Dorval or
No, the other one.
the other one, Mirabel.
Mirabel, merci. And Mirabel was a great project, you know, technically very interesting. They didn't have anything to do with the technical part of it, but what they had to do with was whether you should have, you needed expansion. Montreal was growing, Expo had sort of helped in this, and the question was whether you should actually add to Dorval, which is the actual airport now, or whether you should make it some other site, which eventually, of course, the Trudeau government did. And of course, it never worked out very well because the airlines just didn't find it convenient. But however, and it was a very, very interesting project. But the number of studies are absolutely incredible. The detail of course, how you move bags, how you move people. There have been many. I'm sorry I don't have the list here, but it was just absolutely fantastic. And during the time of all this was happening, the many projects they were doing, and when they were in Montreal, of course, Blanche was teaching. And surely that interacted with these projects that they were doing, and the work of the office, of course. The attitudes and the principles of the methodology and the concepts of the pragmatism are all things that are so amazing. And I can't tell you how impressed I am by the thoroughness of their work. And it's very exciting to me that this conference is taking place. It's just the beginning of discovery of their work, which is the projects I think we'll hear tonight that nobody's ever probably heard of. And the fact is that what was I going to say? Well, the fact is that the number, the approach to the projects, their prescience, they were always a sort of thinking ahead of what was happening, and the humane and pragmatism at the same time, city dreamers of reality, and these projects say so much about their work, but they also say so much about the history of Canada during that time. So I'm waiting to see the rest of this program. Thank you very much.